Welcome back, DIYers. Today we're going to be talking about the 3 mistakes people make when patching drywall. Mistake number 1 is not having a flat, smooth surface to put the spackling on to begin with. So you want to make sure you take care of that first. So today we're going to be removing this piece that was from a toilet paper holder. It broke, came off the wall. So we're going to remove this and we're going to patch the hole where that was. So we're going to start by taking out the screw and anchor in the wall. Now we're going to be using the DAP Drydex spackling for this repair. It's very easy to use, it's inexpensive, it goes on pink, and then when it's ready to sand, it turns to a white color, so it's super easy to use. Now the opening on the container is kind of small, so you won't be able to fit your 4-inch putty knife in there, but you can use a small one, a 2-inch, to get in there and actually get the spackling out. So we're going to start by just getting a big portion of the spackling. We're going to kind of put it on there. Now you can kind of tell there's a few chunks there. Some of this may be dry from a previous use. So you want to make sure you get any chunks out of that. Now you're going to see here, when I went to put that on, there are a few spots that are sticking up. So that tells you that's going to be a problem no matter how much spackling you put on that. So what I always suggest doing is taking your putty knife and scraping that to get any of those sections off of there. You want this to be as flat and smooth of a surface as possible. Now sometimes that does mean going out further around, which is not a problem. We're going to fill that and sand it over and you'll never even know. But you have to start with a smooth, flat surface. So now we've got this scraped and smoothed out pretty well. We're going to go ahead and apply a generous amount of spackling. Mistake number 2 that most people make is trying to keep the patch as small as possible instead of using a larger amount of spackle, feathering it out and getting the smoothest finish possible. Trying to keep the area very small so they don't put enough spackling on it. The goal is to cover that and make it as smooth as possible. So you're going to add a generous amount and then you're going to feather it out thin the further out you go. Now you can use a 2-inch putty knife for this, or once you get your spackling on there, you can change to a 4-inch. That helps you to be able to feather it out a little bit better. Now you may notice right here in the middle where the screw hole is, there's a little bit of a bubble. So to fix that, you want to make sure that area has a little bit extra spackling on it. The way you want to do this, you put an extra amount there. So I'm actually going to use my smaller putty knife and put a nice generous amount right there. Now you want to adjust the pressure that you're putting on the putty knife. So you want to start off with a lot of pressure the further away, and as you get closer to that spot, you loosen up the pressure just a little bit, and then back to heavy when you get to the bottom. That's going to give you just a slight extra bit of spackle right there in the middle where that screw was. Now you go further out to feather that out so that if it's a little thicker here, by the time you get to the edge, it's real thin and it's going to be a smooth transition to the rest of the wall. If you're getting some pitting or areas you don't like, you can add more and continue to feather that out. The key is patience. It's not something you want to rush. Now, as you can see, we've got this pretty nice and smooth, no bubbles. There's a little bit of excess at the top. I'm just going to take my putty knife, clean that up, make it real smooth. Just kind of fade that in. Now you'll see there, let off the pressure and it kind of messed it up a little bit. So you just go back over that. This is very forgiving, so you do have time to be patient, take your time and do it right. Any edges like this, you want to make sure you go back and smooth out. Now these larger creases, you'll be able to sand those out. They're in the middle, you've got a little bit of leeway there. The edges, you really want to try to make sure those are pretty smooth. That's where your transition to the rest of the drywall is. Now again, the benefit to the dry decks is it goes on pink, as you can see, and when it's ready to sand, it turns white. So this middle area here is thicker. It's going to take a while to dry, especially where that screw hole is. So you want to make sure that it is completely dry before you sand. Now the third and final mistake that most people make is over sanding. You don't want to sand over and over and over all the way down to the drywall. Then you're going to have to start all over. So you want to sand a little bit, wipe it off, check your finish. Sand a little bit more, wipe it off, check your finish. Now that it's dry and ready to sand, I've got a pro tip for you. If you start sanding this, you're going to make a big mess. So, before you start sanding, grab yourself a trash bag and you want to tape it to the wall just above the baseboard and lay it out over the floor to catch as much of the dust as you can possibly get so you don't make a huge mess. So you just take your trash bag, center it up under where you spackled. Use some painter's tape so that you don't take the finish off the wall. And you just simply tape along the top of that. So now as your dust falls, it's going to fall down onto this trash bag instead of making a big mess on the floor. For sanding, you're just going to use a standard sanding block. You can buy these at Lowe's, Walmart, Home Depot, and they're a few bucks. But as you can see, you can use them over and over again. So you're just going to take your sanding block and you're going to start on the outside edge and just kind of work to get that smooth with the drywall next to it. you can see that you kind of go against that line. If you go with that line, it might help to keep that line, but if you go against it, it will smooth it out. Again, you don't want to over sand. You want to start by lightly sanding around, then you can wipe and see what your finish looks like. We've got a pretty good transition there, so that doesn't need much more. Now we're going to start working our way into the middle where the spackle is a little bit thicker. And you see we've got a few of these lines we want to get rid of as well. Now this is over oversanding can be critical. You do not want to oversand. If you take too much off this middle section, you're going to have to do it all over again. So you want to be real light until you get these lines to disappear. Now we can wipe it away and see if there's any imperfections we need to work out before we can put some paint on it. It feels good and smooth all the way around the edge. Our lines that we had here are all smooth and gone. And just go over it a couple more times for good measure. That is good and smooth. Now you can remove the trash bag from the wall here. You can see that that caught a lot of the dust here. If you look at the floor next to it, doesn't look like hardly any got on it. So that's one way to keep it clean and protected. Nice and clean. Now the wall has a nice smooth finish. The hole is patched. You can't see anything that was there. We've got everything cleaned up. Now it's ready for paint. So if you need tips and tricks on that, we'll have a video coming of that soon. But this is how you correctly patch a hole to make sure that it looks like it was never there. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.